It is November 2025, and this is episode 39 of Citizen Watchdog with Todd Zinser. And tonight we're going to keep talking about the lead service line replacement program that the city's been operating for the past several years. There was an audit that was performed by the internal audit manager, found significant issues with the process used or employed by the waterworks to handle the scrap pipe under the contract. It was supposed to be recycled and the city was supposed to get a cut, etc. And they found that the process that had, I guess, been imagined or thought up for the program for scrapping the lead wasn't being implemented, and instead the scrap pipe went missing for, I guess, 5 years. There was a reference in the audit report that they had set up one of these big dumpsters or containers, they call them, for the lead pipe crews to place their scrap in that container. And the audit report says that the container had not been serviced for 5 years, which means that if the lead pipe that was taken out of the ground at I don't know how many thousands of residents' properties, if it wasn't in that container, well, where did it go? And that's kind of the question we're going to try to look into tonight. And then the other thing, and I raised this in a Facebook post, actually two things. One was that the issue of whether the lead pipe constituted an environmental hazard, that should have been determined by the waterworks, and it's not clear whether they made that determination. Because if the lead pipes qualify as a environmental hazard, the pipe has to, be tested and have a certain toxicity level. And if it hits that level, then it's an environmental hazard. The city looks like they were treating the lead pipe as a employee hazard issue. And so they would test the employee's blood that was working with the lead pipe to make sure that it wasn't elevated levels of lead in the blood. And they would have certain handling. They came up with all these procedures for handling the lead from a worker's safety perspective. But the key is going to be, the key to whether or not the city is really in trouble on this is the determination whether or not the lead pipes could be considered an environmental hazard. And so I can tell you that my records request for the report of investigation that the waterworks did, I had already looked at the audit that the internal audit manager did. There's no indication at this point that the waterworks actually tested the pipes for what they call RCRA purposes. RCRA stands for the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and it goes back to the 1970s. And there are very stringent rules concerning the handling of environmental hazards. When I was at the Department of Transportation, we did a number of cases involving hazardous material transportation. They're very serious offenses. We worked with the Environmental Crimes Unit at the Department of Justice. And believe it or not, we actually prosecuted American Airlines back in the 1990s for the way they were handling hazardous material back then. They actually just let people walk up to the ticket counter with a package to go onto the aircraft, and American Airlines was not even checking to see what was in the package. Or I don't know if I'm oversimplifying it, but it was a long time ago. I don't remember a lot of the details. But anyway, RCRA is a very serious federal statute, and it does have criminal penalties. It has civil penalties. For example, there are some violations of RCRA where the daily penalty could be up into tens of thousands of dollars for every day that there's a violation. So we don't know whether the city's exposed to that or not. I think I'm going to have to file another FOIA request or public records request to see whether or not they did that testing. Otherwise, if they didn't, I believe there's actually an offense in RCRA for a failure to determine whether something is hazardous waste. So it's not a case where the city could say, oh, well, we didn't know, we didn't test to know, and so, we're sorry. That's not going to cut it. And it could be a very serious thing. I mean, lead that's not properly disposed of, that could be, ironically, the biggest threat, I believe, is to the water supply. And for a municipal waterworks to be careless with lead scrap, that's just very serious. So even if it's here's how it gets even more complicated. Even if the city had tested and had determined that it was hazardous, there is another rule, another federal rule that said scrap metal properly recycled is exempt from the rules. And so what that would require is that even if those lead pipes were hazardous and the chain of custody was maintained and the lead pipes went straight from the city to the recycler and it was chain of custody and that type of thing, there's an exemption for getting rid of hazardous waste if it goes to a authorized or a legitimate recycler. But if there's somebody in between the city and the recycler, which happened in this case, the testimony is that the lead pipe was given to local scrappers, I guess, who paid cash to the city employee for the pipe, and then they went and scrapped it somewhere. Breaking that chain of custody is a problem, is going to be a problem. Whether it's hazardous, that's really going to be the key to all of this. And so there's some exposure here. There's a risk to the city in a number of ways. Number one is what actually did happen to those lead pipes. And on my Facebook post the other day, I lined out 3 things, that being one of them. What is the city doing to track down what happened to those lead pipes? There aren't that many scrappers around, or aren't that many recycling centers around here. I don't think it would be difficult to do some interviewing at those locations and see whether or not any of the city's scrap lead pipe wound up at that facility. Otherwise, who knows where it is? And that's where the real environmental problem comes in. If it wasn't properly disposed of, where is it? And it could very well be leaching into the water supply in some way. So the city really needs to track that down. I guess if they've made a determination that it's not hazardous, which I don't know that they've done that, maybe it's less serious, but I think that's very, very serious. So that's one thing. The second thing was not the lead pipe, but what about the copper pipe? When you have a theft, I guess it's a theft. It's basically stealing from the municipality. When you have a theft of one commodity, in this case, scrap lead pipe, and you have employees, in this case, basically, I don't know, 5 to 7 employees may have known about this theft and the mishandling of the lead pipe. But if you have a whole crew of employees who are being dishonest, which apparently the 5 other employees on the crew were reprimanded for being dishonest, and at the same time you have a big inventory of copper pipe, you got to check to see whether or not all the copper that you purchased or procured either made it into the ground or is sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Because the theft of copper from waterworks or municipal water departments is a big problem. And it's worth a lot of money. So hopefully, although I doubt it, but hopefully the city went immediately to check their supply of copper pipe, given the fact that they had a lead pipe crew who was working on the replacement program, also having access to copper. So I think they need to check that. That'd be number 2. And right off the top of my head, I can't remember what number 3 was. But the issue is, for me anyway, if it's an environmental issue, that's very serious. But the other thing that really bothers me is that once the auditor was inside the operation, checking out the operation, it's like they put blinders on. And all they did was check internal controls. And yes, they found a weakness in internal controls, even a theft. They found that apparently somehow. The report doesn't really detail how they figured that out. But that's it. That's all they looked at. And you have all these other issues, these environmental issues. The question, well, were these lead pipes hazardous? Could they be considered hazardous under the federal regulations? And I think the state regulations mirror the federal regulations. But, for example, a very key determination that the city should have made, was required by regulation to have made, was a determination whether it was hazardous. And there's no mention of that in the internal audit manager's report. There's no mention of that in the Waterworks internal investigation. And that's the key question. And I don't think the city is going to be able to get away with it if they haven't done that determination. There is a specific penalty or a specific requirement. It's called failure to determine. And if there's a failure to determine, that could implicate some serious financial consequences for the city. So they can't claim ignorance about whether or not the pipes were hazardous. I mean, they can claim ignorance if they are ignorant about it, but they can't claim ignorance and claim that they're not responsible, because the duty to determine whether the pipe was hazardous is in the regulations. So I think where you have to take it from here is I do have to try to determine whether or not there was such a determination made. And if there was, and the determination was that the pipes didn't reach that toxicity level, I can't say that word apparently, if it didn't reach that level, then fine. We're basically left with a theft issue. But if there is no determination, then you're dealing with a violation of RCRA. And that can be very serious, especially for an organization whose job it is to supply safe drinking water to the community. So that's what we're going to look at. And one of these days, somebody in the city is going to figure out that when the auditor does a job that they need to do more, than just look at internal controls. They need to look at the entire operation. They need to follow any leads that they get. And if they have to turn it over to investigators, they should do that. I'm not crazy about the way the Waterworks handled the situation. I have looked at some of the supporting documents, but they were very difficult to work with. They came to me as messages on Outlook. Every document I got, except for a couple, were messages, and trying to convert messages to PDFs was very, very tedious. But anyway, I did finally do that, and I'm still going through some of it. But this issue of the environmental hazard versus a workplace hazard is very, very significant, and one that needs to be looked into. And if the city hasn't done it, then I'm going to take one stab at it. And if that doesn't work, I'll probably just go ahead and write to the Ohio EPA or maybe even the US EPA. But it's really not a good situation where you don't know where 6 years, 5 or 6 years of scrap lead, where it is or what happened to it. The least we could do is try to track it down and make sure that it went to an authorized scrapper of hazardous material. Again, it was hazardous in the workplace, but it's yet to be determined whether or not it was an environmental hazard. If you can make that distinction, the environmental laws are very, very complicated, and hopefully the city has done that, and that will relieve them of some risk that otherwise they have with not keeping proper control of that lead pipe. And again, the copper issue, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars that could be at risk. They've got to determine how much copper went into the ground and how much they have in their warehouse, and make sure that reconciles. Otherwise, they've got probably a bigger theft on their hands than the one they had with the lead pipe. So it's surprising how some of these seemingly straightforward fact situations, like watching the video of this guy that WCPO ran throwing his lead in the back of his truck, something straightforward like that can be so complicated. But when you start talking about environmental rules, regulations, and laws, it does get very complicated. So until next time, we're going to leave it there and follow up with the city on that determination. So until next time, thank you.